There's a river that I go that nobody has to know where I would wait for you, long for you. It's the river that we went that last summer that we spent the day you left for. Whoa.